Good evening. Thanks for coming out this rainy evening. We appreciate that you are all here. So a warm welcome to the 9/11 Museum members and to viewers tuning in, to this live web broadcast. My name is Lolita Jackson, and I'm Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees of the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. I'm also a survivor of the 1993 and 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center, and I've spoken on this stage a number of times in the past on those events. This evening's program is in collaboration with the National Jazz Museum in Harlem and is the latest in the 9/11 Memorial Museum's Intersections Public Program Series. Intersections examines the often surprising connections between 9/11 and today's world. From global industries to individual lives, the attacks marked a fundamental shift for many, including me, altering trajectories in ways both expected and unforeseen. The National Jazz Museum in Harlem promotes the Jazz in Harlem experience to New York City residents and to national, international, and online audiences. The Jazz Museum has 4 core programs: education, performance and outreach, exhibits, and partnership, which this is one of them, which intersect to build a broader, more inclusive, and more sustained audience for jazz, which is important to so many of us. And we provide performance opportunities and career exposure to jazz artists in Harlem, New York City, and worldwide to help make jazz accessible to every person on the planet. Each year, the museum produces more than 180 free and highly subsidized performances, activities, and events, and serves over 200,000 people of all ages, ethnicities, nationalities, backgrounds, and income levels. Many of our programs are free, from Harlem, New York City, the US, and worldwide. The 2 artistic directors, 8-time Grammy Award winner, bassist, bandleader, Christian McBride, and Grammy and Oscar winner, bandleader, John Batiste, are actively involved in the activities of the museum. We're joined this evening by several of our trustees. Raise your hands in the front, including our board chair, Richard Taffet. Please speak with any of us for more information on the Jazz Museum afterward if you want to know more. I'm also a jazz singer, and in addition to working in the World Trade Center, I was a weekly participant in sessions at something called the Off-Wall Street Jam, a space at 47 Murray Street, only a few blocks from here, where musicians who worked in finance and elsewhere could gather for lunchtime and after-work jam sessions. I participated in many of those, organized bands to perform, and simply be with like-minded musicians who needed day jobs to pay the rent. I'd been a member of the Jam since the mid-90s and formed several bands, including a Steely Dan cover band called No Static. Extra credit if you know what that song that's from. And we were together during the time of 9/11. I was actually lead singer, so I was the Donald Fagen of the band. We also regularly performed at a space called the Orange Bear, which has been long gone, but was also at 47 Murray Street. So when I was chosen to speak at the 2023 gala about my experience through the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center, I spent time backstage with Beth Hillman. And we quickly realized we had a shared background as tenor saxophone players. I played tenor saxophone and bass clarinet, and a love of jazz. I immediately thought about ways our 2 organizations to collaborate, and our brains just started working immediately. And I knew firsthand that live music was a vibrant part of the downtown community for so many people. So we hope this is the first in a series of events that we can do together. With that, we turn to tonight's program. We're joined by 4 remarkable individuals, 3 of whom were members of the first class of Juilliard School's Jazz Studies program, which started that very September in 2001. Dominick Farinacci is a jazz trumpeter and composer and has served as ambassador to Jazz at Lincoln Center from 2013 to 2015 in Doha, Qatar. I said it wrong, didn't I? I'm sorry. Oh well, I failed. His 2016 recording, Short Stories, was produced by 4-time Grammy Award-winning producer Tommy LaPuna and features Jacob Collier, Christian McBride, and Steve Gadd, the drummer from Steely Dan. He's currently the director of Tri-C Jazz Fest Academy, a year-round pre-college program at Cuyahoga Community College. Erica von Kleist is a multi-instrumentalist, comedian, and educator. She's toured with the biggest and brightest stars in jazz and Broadway, having recorded on 5 Grammy-nominated recordings. Her debut jazz comedy show covers a host of topics, including her story as a woman in a male-dominated world. I want to see that. Carmen Intorre is a drummer who has performed and recorded with numerous musicians. A 2011 Grammy nominee for his co-producer credit on the critically acclaimed album by Joey Francesco entitled Never Can Say Goodbye, the music of Michael Jackson. Intorre currently tours extensively throughout the world alongside legendary jazz guitarist Pat Martino. We're also joined by Loren Schoenberg, who is the Senior Scholar at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem and is on the faculty at Juilliard. He's also a 20-year friend of mine. Loren was hired in 2001 to lead our efforts to establish the National Jazz Museum in Harlem and served for more than a decade as its executive director, creating many of his signature programs and enlisting Christian McBride, Jonathan Batiste, Ken Burns, and Wynton Marsalis to be involved to further help the museum's mission. Thank you all for joining us. And now I want to ask you all to give a warm welcome to Dominick, Erica, Carmen, and Loren in conversation with President and CEO of the 9/11 Memorial Museum, President Beth Hillman.
Thank you, Lolita. One of the things that strikes me about New York is there are literally artists everywhere. Lolita had been connected to the 9/11 Memorial Museum because of her experience in the World Trade Center in 1993 and in 2001. But then backstage, as I was waiting to come on stage at the benefit dinner for the Memorial Museum, we realized the connection around jazz, her leadership role with the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, and the potential for us to shed some light on another part of the 9/11 story that's not often told, the connection of the music, the impact on the community in music, and also how it resonated, 9/11 resonated moving forward in the lives of people who were musicians on 9/11. So tonight we have an amazing group here. So first of all, just that we're on stage with the musical instruments behind me marks to our folks who are here tonight. This is a different type of program. For the first time, we'll have a full band performing here in the 9/11 Memorial Museum auditorium, which is fabulous. I want to thank everybody who's come out, including, as Lolita mentioned, our colleagues from the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, to everybody who braved the weather to be here in person tonight, and also all the folks who are listening in warm and dry places. I'm going to start by turning it over to Loren to talk a little bit about this program. So you realize we have some remarkable musicians here. They share a connection that was formed really in September 2001 because of the program that they were all a part of. And Loren is going to set the stage for us.
No, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. That time in 2001 is really marked in my mind because it was just exactly that moment that Len Garment and I were kind of opening our first office in New York to build a museum. And at the same time, something equally amazing was happening. And that was that Wynton Marsalis had put together a program after years of trying to create a jazz studies program at the Juilliard School. And I remember our saying at that time was jazz has brought Juilliard kicking and screaming into the 20th century. It took a while to have jazz there. But they started a program, and Wynton put together a wonderful program. I was thrilled to be part of it as the jazz history professor and occasionally conducting the jazz orchestra. And it really was a unique program. It still is a unique program because of the faculty, because of the point of view, and because it really kind of merges with the Jazz Museum in a certain kind of way, because it was really much concerned with the past, the present, and the future. And that all three were inextricably bound. And now I'll just turn it over here because I met these three people when they were 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. And I have to tell you, maybe they're too modest, and you alluded to it in your introduction, but each one has not only succeeded and thrived as a professional player, but also have other careers. What Erica does with her theater work, which includes comedy and other things, also education in her hometown, that she actually brought a band to New York once from far, far away. Dominick is involved with something called Modern Warrior and other projects that have to do with veterans coming back from Afghanistan and other places, and has done a lot of what I would call humanitarian work. I'll also mention, and then I'll stop with the introduction, that when you were volunteering at the Jazz Museum when you were about 20 years old, you found a bookkeeping error that saved us a lot of money. Oh. So I'll buy you a drink after the thing. And Carmen also teaches and has probably maybe even more than the others well, I shouldn't say more. That's not fair. But is out there as a player, playing with everybody, mostly in groups led by some of the great legends of jazz, and is also a burgeoning educator. So that's the introduction that I would give, and I guess, turn it back to you.
Thank you, Loren. So in order to set the scene a little bit, we're going to put up a photo that actually Erica helped us find from the Juilliard Jazz Orchestra in 2001. This is photo number 3 for our team in the booth.
We'll see. Yeah.
And you'll see 2 of the 3 folks here on the stage. The others, photo 3 actually, so that's 1. That's the World Trade Center where there were concerts, so there's photo 3. Okay, see if you can spot Erica. But you can see Carmen is on drums there,
Yeah.
and Dominick is right behind the pillar over here. He's just on the other. He's just out of the picture actually. So, and because what happened on 9/11 is so indelible for those of us who lived through it, I'm going to ask our guests to talk about what they experienced on 9/11. So, and we'll start with Carmen.
Thank you. Well, our program was interesting because not only did it start the week of 9/11, there were only 18 of us in the program. So it was very small. It was basically a full big band with 2 rhythm sections, bass, piano, and drums. And we're also trying to prove ourselves as a program in the Juilliard School. So we're in the thick of rehearsing and preparing for our first concert, and 9/11 happens. And as we were all in shock, I think one thing, my friends can elaborate, but one thing that really, I think, helped was the music itself, was rehearsal. We had to keep moving and prepare for our concert and our debut at the Juilliard School. So while we were rehearsing and dealing with the chaos, we were also tight-knit. So all of these aspects really helped us, at least helped me, cope and just kind of make it through. And but the music and the environment that we were able to create really was a saving grace.
Carmen, you
Yes.
You're a native New Yorker.
I am.
And so before you came to Juilliard to start this program, what were you doing?
Well, I was also in school at another college called the New School, which Loren also taught at. But I was performing around, working and practicing and really trying to hone my craft and prepare for my audition to this program. And
So you knew many people in the community that were deeply affected by 9/11.
oh, totally. And matter of fact, a lot of my elders were affected because their livelihood and came to a halt at that point. And yeah,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Dominick, how did that day unfold for you, 9/11?
I remember Carmen and I were roommates on the 27th or 28th floor of the dorms at Juilliard, and our room actually looked, south. So, several miles away. But I remember waking up, that morning right before our improv, or right before, whatever our 9 o'clock class was, and we were of course running late as usual. And remember looking out the window and seeing the smoke, you see it from there, but not really thinking much of it. But I remember heading into class, and then remember the janitor had said, the towers had fallen down, and at that point it was it was so foreign, right? Because we had nothing to compare it to, and this was the beginning of a new reality and a new world, and so it was just more of kind of confusion. And all that, and as opposed to panic. I don't remember panicking so much. We were safe, we were there, but just so confused as to what was going on. But I remember, like in the following days, I mean, as powerful as the music is, for as artists, I think equally powerful is like that tribe that we had, right? And we came, to New York City. We're all 17, 18 years old, most of us, and we immediately found our own tribe, and that beautiful kind of connection really, I think really kind of, helped kind of keep everybody kind of focused. And of course, the music is part of that tribe, but you think about people in all different areas who are really passionate about certain things, and you find that community of others who have those similar interests, and that's really like your lifeline, especially at that kind of vulnerable, impressionable age. Yeah.
And Carmen had been here in New York. Where were you before you came to Juilliard?
In Cleveland. Yeah, I'm from Cleveland originally. So yeah, moved up just before that, and yeah.
A big change. So Erica, 9/11, how did that play out for you?
Man, 9/11 is one of those days where, like, for me at least, you remember every moment of your day. I couldn't tell you what happened on 9/12 or 9/10, but I could tell you exactly what happened on 9/11. So I will recount my day. I woke up, got on the train. It was the first official day of classes. So my first thing was I have to get to the registrar to pay my dues and sign paperwork or whatever. Get on the one train at 103rd Street, and the trains were still running. But I heard an announcement that said, this train will be stopping at 14th Street because there's an emergency situation downtown, and everyone's groaning. Oh gosh, you know how it goes. But then somebody said, oh, I heard a plane hit the World Trade Center, and nobody really thought anything, maybe a tiny little plane or whatever. So I get out at 66th Street, get to the registrar's office, I'm filling out paperwork, and people are glued to the TV screen. And we're like, what's going on? And there's the Twin Towers, and there's the smoke coming out, and I'm like, oh my God, that must be like, nobody really knew what was actually happening. And as I'm filling out the paperwork, I hear everyone gasps and says, oh my God, another plane just hit. And we're just, no one's focused on work at this point. We're all just looking at the screen and being like, oh my God, what's happening? And then within like a half an hour or so, they had decided, I think we're all canceling classes. They had removed everybody from the dorm building because they didn't want anyone in the high-rise of the dorms. Brought everyone to the Juilliard lobby, and they had, people had their pillows and their like blankets, and like they were like prepare for not going back to the dorms for like the day at least. And nobody really knew what to do. I locked eyes with Dominick because I had known Dominick from a high school thing we did a couple years earlier. I didn't really know anybody in the program. And Carmen and Dominick and I looked at each other. We're just like, let's get out of here. Let's like go somewhere else. So we ditched and we went to a diner on 10th Ave and 66th Street, the West End Diner maybe? I don't remember. But we got there and we're just sort of like letting the shock settle in of what was happening. A friend of ours named Aaron Parks, a phenomenal jazz pianist who I had gone to Manhattan School of Music with the year earlier, joined us, and his parents joined us too. And his parents lived across the street from the World Trade Center. And had walked from the World Trade Center, still covered in dust, to the diner and sat with us. And Aaron's dad had a digital camera, which in 2001, digital cameras were a big deal. So this was like a big deal. And he had taken photos of things that were happening with the buildings and people. And it was a very shocking, stark realization of what was really happening down there. And they were showing us these photos. And at that point, I was like, I need to go back to my apartment. So I hopped on a bus, got back to my apartment, watched Peter Jennings on my rabbit ears television for about 2 hours, glued to the screen, thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm just alone in this apartment. What do I do? My roommates were gone. So I called up my friends at Manhattan School of Music and said, hey, can I come over and hang with you guys? I'm lonely, I'm scared. Walked up to MSM, hung with my friends there for a while, and then around 10 o'clock, I was like, I gotta go home. I didn't realize there was a curfew. And so I'm walking on Broadway. You know the hill between near Manhattan School of Music up to Columbia near Barnard? It kind of goes uphill on Broadway a little bit. I'm walking up that hill on the east side of Broadway going downtown. There's nobody there. No pedestrians, no cars, nothing. It's an absolute ghost town. I'm freaked out. I'm walking up this hill. All of a sudden, over the hill comes a tank with like the cannon. I don't know what it's called, with the conveyor belt wheels. What is that called?
Tank, you got it.
Yeah,
Tank,
okay. Yeah. Just coming past me really slow. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what's happening, And I'm just like this chick walking down the street. And it just goes right past me, and I am just freaked out, and there's literally nobody around, and I just like walk as fast as I could back to my apartment, and that was the end of my 9/11 day. But yeah, I can recount every moment of where I was that day, and we were just talking in the lobby there, like we're kind of like trauma bonded, like those of us who experienced this, especially that first month of school. I mean, just preparing for the concert and being in rehearsals together, and then having big conversations with our teachers, like how's everybody doing? I don't think anybody really understood like how do we counsel people through this. There's no playbook for this kind of thing. So yeah, it was very memorable is not the right word, but I don't know the right word.
I was just going to add that no, I thought I was going to die that day. You see, because the adults and the teachers there, we were much more shocked in a certain kind of way. And I live near a major bridge. And I said, well, you know, if they bombed this and they did this, will only make sense that where I live, which is right near something that I would take out if I had the chance. And so, you know, we were absolutely, you know, it was a very different experience. But I'll tell you that the resolve of the students in your community was so impressive to the faculty. I don't think we ever put it in those words at that point, but actually you, in a way, were kind of almost like half taking care of us. Because I think we were a lot more freaked out, to coin a term, than you folks were, because you were only 18 or 19 and maybe didn't see it in a larger context. Yeah. Whereas, you know, the United States really had lost its virginity in a way of you know, the mainland had not been attacked. There had been Pearl Harbor, but not this. And so we were just absolutely amazed at how you folks all kept it together. But if I may ask a question, I'm just curious, how about your folks? So in other words, they sent you off, you're a kid, you're in New York, and this happens and your parents are here, and you're there. How did it affect your parents? And did they want you to come home? Or?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I remember having those conversations where you sure you still want to stay up here, and there was no ever like second guess of like, okay, do I want to not be here, right? And just and again, part of it being 18 and part of it having that tribe, which is so, and that support group, you know, which is so powerful and so focused on what you're doing, right? So those conversations always went nowhere. But of course, yeah, parents, everybody, who was around were just gravely worried.
Yeah, and I remember on 9/11, I had a Nokia cell phone, like the block. You know, if you held it to your face too much, like your face would get hot. Like it was one of those old school phones. And my mom had been trying to reach out, like trying to contact me. And then I got a text message from my mom. And it was the weirdest thing. I'd never gotten a text message before, but she figured out how to do the T9, like AAA, 333, QQQQQ, you know, and she had gotten a text through to me. And that was actually the first text message I ever received was from my mom on 9/11, like, are you okay? But yeah, the communication on that day was really challenging because nobody could get through. My parents were freaked out, for sure.
Carmen, do you want to speak to your families or your questions about whether you should stay?
My family, which my mother was scared sick, but I didn't really reach my parents until a couple of days later. And they were just, you know, how's the music going? How's the program? So they were really kind of encouraged. I guess they were just trying to see where my mind was and trying to stay focused on what I was doing. This program was, you know, a big deal. So they wanted the best for me in that way.
I think that underlining what a big deal the program was is worthwhile. So, Loren, can you talk about how you selected this group of 18 extraordinary musicians?
I didn't select them. Winton selected them. But the program itself was really a high watermark in jazz education because of the nature of the faculty, because of, at this point, I had been a consultant on the Ken Burns documentary, along with Winton and Albert Murray and Stanley Crouch and people like that. And there was the program was grounded in a frank assessment of the music and race and culture, and you couldn't escape any of those things in the program, whereas most music conservatories that I've been part of tend to be kind of myopic and they pretty much just focus on B flat and A flat. But and so that's really what made it kind of special. But the important thing, especially, was that there hadn't been a jazz program like this before. So actually, it was a big gamble with the students that we had, because if it had failed, I mean, trying to get that program through the folks at Lincoln Center was a huge thing. So
Did you all feel the pressure of having to fulfill that charge?
Oh, totally.
Yeah, that's interesting.
be
Yeah,
honest.
I'm sure they did.
No, you mentioned it because usually when you go to school, like you're focused on yourself, like trying to do well and meet friends. But when we got there, all the administration is like, man, you guys really need to get this together and do a good job. It was interesting perspective. Yeah. There's so much writing on it. Yeah, and it worked. Everybody. I think everybody in the first class ended up graduating. Yeah.
Yeah, and as I looked at that picture, the great majority of those people in 2024 are playing and have made it, making a living from playing music. At Juilliard, and this is true in both schools, 33% of people who graduate, even from these fine schools, wind up not even being in the arts. 33% roughly wind up doing it, but teaching or doing something, and not even at the university level necessarily. Still playing, but and only 1/3 really become, as these folks have become, folks who are known by name and by their expertise. But at that point, it had to be 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was also, we all received full scholarships, and we were given stipends, and it was a performance-based program.
Yeah, stipend.
Well,
That was nice.
but
606. It was six.
we don't have to tell them how much it was.
Okay.
It wasn't a whole lot.
It wasn't a lot. It was enough for a couple of steak dinners. We wasted all the stipend on Sparks Steakhouse, by the way, which was amazing. Yeah. Well, we paid for your dinner one time. Yeah,
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
So in this pressure-packed, novel environment where you were connected to each other, you found strength and solace in the intensity of the program and in your desire to perform. Can you put the picture back up again? The picture of
The band.
the jazz orchestra. And Erica, you were saying you knew when that concert was. When did this concert take place?
October 30th.
Was it exactly
Yes.
October? Wow, okay.
Yep.
Nobody looks
think-
happy.
It was the I think it was the inaugural concert for the jazz department.
And we should give
Yeah,
credit
it was amazing.
to Joe,
President. Yep.
the president, Joe Polisi, who was a wonderful classical bassoonist, but he really was so into the jazz program, and it was so unusual to find somebody. Did you have any interactions with him?
My parents did.
Yeah, yeah.
I did throughout my tenure a few times. He was always very supportive. Yeah.
So so you pulled together, you put on this concert, you succeeded through the program. You mentioned a little bit of this, Carmen, but you were also recognizing that 9/11 was affecting musicians across the city. And I'll just, if we could put up the other two images, which are of some of the music that took place at the World Trade Center. This is a photo where you can see the architecture of the World Trade Center behind the stage here. This was center stage, where performances took place, often at lunchtime and sometimes after work. There was a dance performance scheduled for 9/11 itself. And then the other image gives you an aerial view of where that stage was, actually on the World Trade Center Plaza. But of course, there were many other places that music was performed that were shut down because of the impact of 9/11 on especially Lower Manhattan. So were you seeing that impact? Carmen, you mentioned you knew that impact on the musicians that you were connected to.
Oh, totally. And some of my teachers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, totally. And it wasn't just in New York. It was kind of global for a while. And recording sessions were being canceled, festivals were being canceled, gigs, rescheduled. So it was tough. I wasn't a professional out there yet, but to hear my teachers talk about it, it's like, I was thinking, I hope it, turns around for the best, Because when I graduate, I hope to, work.
Yeah, you hope there would be venues in which you could
Yes.
perform, and they were, at least for the short term, really shut down. In terms of the longer term impact, did 9/11 alter the trajectory of what you ended up doing in music?
You mean in our individual careers?
Some of the things you've done, Dominick, do seem connected to some of the, certainly some of what we learned from 9/11. Loren mentioned that the recognition of music's role in healing, for instance.
Yeah. For me, actually about 7 years ago, created a production that was not in response to 9/11, but I didn't even think about it at the time, but it's really because of 9/11. So collaborate, always looking for ways to, always really passionate about how we can utilize the arts in ways that are kind of bigger than ourselves, and embedding the arts in important social causes. And through a mutual friend, I ended up meeting a veteran, somebody who fought in Afghanistan, across 3 tours in Afghanistan, the 82nd Airborne. And when I heard his story of coming back home and dealing with, hearing his story, and the timeless and universal story of a warrior and coming back home and, dealing with the trauma and unwinding, dealing with what he dealt with in terms of the incredible pressure he had on him, when he was fighting in Afghanistan, and the loss he found there, and all of these different aspects of the really impact of mental health. But in particular, the resilience that he showed, like both on the battlefield and off the battlefield, and coming back home and working to kind of process, the post-traumatic stress and all these traumatic scenarios. When I started to hear his story, I said, man, how can we create a production where he's kind of front and center talking about his experience? Because this kind of needs to get out of its own echo chamber in terms of mental health of returning veterans. And fast forward about a year later, we created this immersive production where it's called Modern Warrior Live, and he's talking about his experience coming back home, all the things I mentioned. And I created a whole musical kind of an integrative suite, and it turned out to be a touring production, and in recent years has really integrated into the mental health community, into the veteran community. And it wasn't until I got called to do this panel that I thought, well, actually, the reason why I met him, the reason why he went to Afghanistan was because of 9/11. Not directly. That's not what inspired him to enlist, but he was deployed there because of 9/11. And so, talking about mental health, that's the thing that's, really kind of been, floating around, I've been thinking about over the past couple of weeks in preparation for this, and think about, it's really generational trauma that's happened. You can see, it not only impacted the individuals who survived it, family members, and then, a generation of family members, right? And then the first responders, all the individuals who were directly related, all the lives that were lost, all their family members, but then on a global scale, right? And you think about then ended up going to Afghanistan and all the lives that were affected in Afghanistan and different perspectives. So it's truly like generational trauma that and truly changed every aspect of our world as we know it. And just to think about, Loren, you said you feared for your life. You thought you were going to die at 9/11. I didn't feel that at all, but the subsequent years of all of the different scares and the paranoia and all the different shaping of different people of different walks of life and all of that kind of mental weight certainly kind of manifests. So generally generational trauma, and it really kind of manifests over the years and continues now as we look ahead to almost the 25th anniversary already of it.
I just thought about that was interesting because I wasn't near it. I could see it from my window, but I live in Riverdale.
Yeah.
The World Trade Center is right there. But it was such an assault on the U.S. in such a certain kind of way that my mind just went nuts. But I didn't know until I met Lolita, someone who had been through those two experiences. I knew people who had lived down by it when it happened. And I always thought that I was kind of free from that in a certain kind of way until I realized, and I've never mentioned this in public before, but if it's September and it's a beautiful blue sky day, I have I'm getting a little chill up my back just talking about it because I never talk about it. I have a feeling of just looking up like this. And so I imagine that if that's what I feel, if somebody was so far away from it when it happened, that, that it reverberates. I think in terms of the jazz community, maybe it was a little a little presaging what happened with the pandemic, and maybe for younger people who can't put their, who need something to relax, like how it changed everything.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't laugh for a while, and the smell in the air. I think the Vanguard stayed open, if I'm not mistaken, Lolita. I think so. I think the Village Vanguard, which is on 7th Avenue, way down there, I think that stayed open, but the great majority of clubs were closed, and nobody knew if there would be gigs again.
Yeah. Everything below 14th Street, that was like the cutoff. I remember geographically, it was like they weren't allowed to function, or you couldn't get there. Yeah. To talk about the mental health, so one of my first jobs as an educator, I do a lot of work in music education. One of my first jobs as an educator was a teaching artist with an organization called Feel the Music. And the mission of that organization was, and I believe still is, to work with families of 9/11. And so I gave piano lessons and saxophone lessons to kids who had lost either their father or their uncle or their functional father figure in the World Trade Center. And we would meet every Saturday at St. Peter's Church, 54th and Lex, in the basement area, the community area. And the moms and the aunts would all come, and they were so grateful to have this free program for their kids to be able to come and do art and music and dance just for fun. And they would bring food for us. They'd get home-cooked food. They'd bring it all the way from, I don't know where they lived, but it was this wonderful sense of community. And for me, as an educator, I grew up in sort of like the jazz mentality of like, hey, you gotta practice and you gotta be, you gotta be great at your instrument all the time, and you gotta shed and all of this stuff. And literally these kids were just there to have a good time playing piano, or just, I'm teaching them how to play Umbrella by Rihanna. Just something that they feel like they could have fun with and maybe play on their keyboard at home. And it was like, I had to sort of separate that sort of mentality of like taskmaster teacher to like, hey, music education is also therapy. Even if it's not actual music therapy, this is therapy, because you never know what kind of background somebody has. And so working with those kids who had lost their fathers in the Trade Center was like a huge wake-up call in terms of the value of education and what our jobs are as teachers a lot of the time.
Well, you point out to how many artists are also teachers from nearly the beginning, that you're engaged with learning from each other and connecting, building that tribe, that cohort as you learn together with the faculty, but also connecting to others in the community who can benefit from your understanding of how you learned, how they can learn, and the different roles that music can play in their lives, and that jazz can play in their lives. And so I think maybe we should hear some jazz now. So, which means I exit here, and we're gonna ask our extraordinary Juilliard musicians to step over to the other part of the stage and share their work with us.
Okay.
Good.
We should mention that we've been joined by someone who graduated from the Juilliard School just a few years ago, who's doing great things internationally. I wasn't even sure he was born by 9/11. It turns out he was just a few years old, but I think it was important for him to be part of this thing. This is Felix Mosholm on the bass. I forgot it was daylight savings time. Once again, before we go, I just want to acknowledge to you all to please look up and spend some time with these folks' careers, records, things that they do. It is so broad, and I can say, you know, on behalf of the Juilliard program, that there couldn't be 3 more exemplary graduates who have taken on and frankly created their own worlds, not relying on someone else to create something, but have done it themselves. So once again, Erica von Kleist, Dominick Farinacci, Carmen Intorre, and a young man who's already well on his way, Felix Molsholm. And on behalf of the museum and the board and everyone else, oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Lolita and the leadership of the museum here, this is a collaboration that we certainly intend to follow. And I will thank the director here, the president, and also Lolita and everyone else. This has been an absolute, I'll say a joy, because it shows that there's hope. And if jazz stands for anything, it's for optimism. So why don't we go about with something by Miles Davis? I think he wrote it. I was a jazz history teacher. Okay. Okay. Whatever. Somebody count it off there.
I'll play it up front.
Yeah. on, Felix. Let's take a bow, Juilliard style. Thank you.